Hi, it's Squatchy. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the 4th Annual Indigenous Children, Youth, and Family Conference. We are so glad that you are joining us today. Before we get started, we'll go through just a little bit of housekeeping. We have everybody muted as you're joining. This is a Zoom meeting platform, not a webinar platform. So if you don't want to share your video, please go ahead and turn it off. Otherwise, we're so happy to see your faces. I feel like it helps us feel connected, and so glad to see so many familiar faces and some new friends joining us today. So if you want to feel free, get comfortable with either your camera on or off. Everybody again is muted. I will share really quick. I am Talina Ives, the Director of Tribal Relations for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. I carry the ancestral name of Hahamu. Nukayet I am Port Gamble Sklallam, and I am really excited for this conference. I woke up this morning just so excited, thinking about the next couple of days ahead, and so happy for you to all join us. Hoping you can all hear me okay. I'll just do a quick check. Is everything okay sound-wise? Thank you so much. So as we're gathered for this conference, I'll just share our conference theme this year is honoring our past, celebrating our future, and healing through Native American traditions and culture. Such a beautiful theme that I am thankful for, and want to take this moment to encourage you to think about this theme and how it relates to you, honoring our past. Just take a moment to think about your heritage, your past, your history, your family, thinking about those special people in your lives that have really nurtured you and gave you healing and gave you a sense of identity. Bring them with you today. And then think about your purpose and why you're gathering with us today, what brings you here, what brings you to this work, and carry that with you throughout the next couple of days. So the premise of our theme is that we want to honor the work of our ancestors that have brought us here today to celebrate our future. We have a lot to celebrate with the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in Brackeen. Lots to celebrate, and continue to use our traditions and culture for healing. The main goals of our conference are the opportunities for professional development and community engagement. We want to focus on the content on supporting your work in two ways: offering tools that you can learn to take back to your work and provide inspiration and a sense of community. We are super excited about the speakers who will be joining us over the next couple of days, and we're sure you'll see some familiar faces alongside some of the nation and global experts who will be joining us today and tomorrow. We're also thankful to be able to have the opportunity to do this event virtually, allowing us the freedom to be able to share statewide. We even have some people joining us throughout the country, and in the past we've even had some of our relatives from New Zealand and Canada, our First Nations and Aboriginal relatives who have joined us for our gatherings. So that we can get to know each other a little bit, I encourage you to take a moment to share in the chat who you are, where you're working from, and what community you are part of, or what unit you work in. While we're doing that, I'll ask Angela if you don't mind getting some slides ready to share. We do have a few slides to help guide us through today. Awesome. Thank you, Angela. All right, so that's just a little bit of logistics. I know that it's important for us to get started in a good way. I'd like to offer a small bit of medicine and from our Lashute Seed language, a very short way to open us up And so forgive me as I'm still a student of our language and am still learning. Ohaha shaksiam, otegwitsi cheth, twal ti slahel. We thank you for this day. Otegwi chet cheth twal ti sask ocheth. We thank you for this gathering. Guahalita chet ti lot locheth. We thank you for our elders. Guahalita chet ti bi bedacheth. Please bless our children. Ob us vista. So be it. Thank you for making some time to be able to share in the chat. It's great to see so many people joining us from throughout the state with such diversity. This conference is designed for helping to support not just our state staff and tribal partners, but all partners who are invested in working in tribal communities. And we're super excited to be joining you today on November 1st as we kick off Native American Heritage Month. So if you don't mind, the next slide, please, Angela. In recognition of Native American Heritage Month, I want to echo the words of former President Barack Obama when he shared in his statement in 2016. As the first Americans, Native Americans have helped shape the future of the United States through every turn of our history. Today, young American Indians and Alaska Natives embrace open-ended possibilities and are determining their own destinies. During National Native American Heritage Month, we pledge to maintain the meaningful partnerships we have with tribal nations, and we renew our commitment to our nation-to-nation relationships as we seek to give all children the future they deserve. So we hope that during this month that we avoid perpetuating stereotypes and instead challenge them. Let this be a time, as every day should be, not just a month, but to recognize Indigenous self-determination and tribal sovereignty. Tribal history and our very presence has largely been absent from public education. And in Washington State, we are thankful for the implementation of since time immemorial curriculum that helps to counter the narrative of dominant settler colonial education systems. STI, since time immemorial, was born out of the advocacy of tribal leaders, Indigenous educators, and allies. It was championed by the late Senator McCoy, a Tulalip tribal member who we will always be grateful for and hold near and dear to our heart. The National Congress of American Indians describes the harms of generational bias of Americans because of the invisibility of Native peoples and the erasure of contemporary Native American contributions, innovations, and accomplishments in K-12 education, further sharing that Americans grow up learning a false, distorted narrative about Native Americans. So it is my hope that we take serious the opportunities to disrupt the historicized and antiquated notion of our people from the Disney or Hollywood narrative, but that we engage with actual present-day realities of Indigenous peoples. This background that you see many of us have, if you're a DCYF staff, I want to direct your attention to where you can find this. This is available to you as you can choose a virtual background and encourage you to do so. With that, I am so thankful that we have DCYF Secretary Ross Hunter joining us today to also share a short welcome. And with that, thank you, Ross, for joining. We have a few minutes to share with you, to share with us welcome message, any words of accomplishments that you've seen with DCYF and our partnerships with tribes, and any goals that you would like us to continue to work on. Thank you, Secretary Hunter.
Thank you, Talina. And I'll point out to everyone that in her opening sentence introducing me, she twice referenced the brevity of the remarks that she would like me to make. And so I will try and honor that today. I am Ross Hunter. I'm the secretary of the agency, and I am just coming from 2 days of wearing a suit, actually, at which I don't do so much anymore, at the 34th Annual Centennial Accords, a meeting between the cabinet, the governor, his cabinet, and tribal leaders across the state. And it's always a powerful meeting and an opportunity for us to work together and to develop I would say for me, the value is to develop our personal relationships. There are a number of issues that are always brought up that we want to work on more seriously. And but the relationship building is very powerful for me as an opportunity to really talk to leaders. What Talina did ask me to do is talk briefly about the remaining 440 days in the Inslee administration. It's his third term. He's announced publicly that he'll be not running for re-election, and there'll be a new governor in 440 days. And it's a time for people like me to think, all right, what are we going to get done? I serve at the pleasure of the governor. The new governor may have a different pleasure. So I want to leave my workplace clean. I want to make sure that the work that we have started is actually finishing. And we have a couple of top line goals that we've been working on for the entire time that this agency has been here. And I think the first one, and the one we talk about the most, is our desire to have a smaller, safer, more thoughtful child welfare system. I set a goal 6-7 years ago of having a system that was half the size of what it was, but with the same level of safety. And we've made pretty significant progress towards that. We're about 40% smaller than we were 5 years ago. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Some of it's intentional on our part. A fair amount of it is intentional. Some of it's about the significant reductions, both nationally and here in Washington, of child poverty. Reducing child poverty is the best way to reduce the need for a child welfare system. And you'll see some work from the administration on that in the future, in the next budget cycle, which I'm pretty excited about. But our work in doing that is to try and make the system be as smart as we can make it, as compliant with the law, and understanding that there is harm in removals, as well as there's potential harm in leaving children in places that are dangerous. So for us, we've made big progress. Now's the time to really improve our practice, to make sure that we're tight, that we really are safe, that we're really trying to do high quality work with our practice quality. That means being 100% compliant with the new interpretations of the Indian Child Welfare Act, both the Washington and the national version by our state Supreme Court, and as well as the changes that we've seen in 1227. I don't have time today to talk about that, for which Talina is grateful that I'm not going to do that. We've talked about the impact of 1227. We'll be releasing regular updates on what's happening as a result of that change. One of the big changes that we've made is increasing our placement with relatives. We're up from about 40% up to 57% across our entire portfolio. I don't have that broken out demographically yet, and we'll continue to release those results nationally. We typically release them around the beginning of the year. Big deal. Changing our relative placements and ensuring that we're actually getting financial resources to relatives. It just makes the world a whole lot better place. If grandma's going to take care of kids, she ought to have resources to do that. We've made progress on that. We have more progress to make in the next 440 days. The big change that I'd really like to have done in that time period is our investment in upstream prevention. We had a couple of tribes in the Centennial Accord meeting yesterday reference our work on positive Indian parenting. It's a very well received program, and it works super well, has great evidence. We have training classes to train new providers, and we're willing to contract with any of the tribes that are interested in providing that program to provide more slots, more involvement in that. It's been a great program, and it's been, again, very well received. We'll be doing a lot of work upstream to make that work. The other big change in our child welfare system is not so much work that we're doing, but work that we're doing with our partner agencies to make sure that there are placement opportunities for adolescents with incredibly high needs. We want to make sure that our autism and other developmental disability placements are actually the least restrictive placements that we can have, that are safe for children and for families. And having kids backed up in hospitals is just not an acceptable outcome. We need a mental health system that really works for families and for children here in Washington. And we're working with our partners and other agencies to make that happen. Outside of that work, our work around implementing the Fair Start for Kids Act is really important. We'd like to have that pretty much nailed down by the time we move on to the next administration. Significant increases in our reimbursements and rates and support for families so that childcare, high quality childcare, is more affordable for more families. And finally, in our juvenile rehab, we're really adjusting to the change to JR to 25, and we have a lot of work to do to ensure physical safety and security at our Echo Glen facility. And you'll see a fence, you'll see a bunch of other updates there that are not so exciting to talk about, but are pretty important to maintaining a safe operation. Our work around adolescent transition out of JR into the rest of the world, same for young people who leave us directly from child welfare is also really, really important for us. And you'll see, again, additional work on how do we help preserve families in that space. I'm out of time. I'm gonna leave you. We have a big chunk of work left to do, and I'm really committed to getting it done. And I want to thank you for attending this conference. It looks like a tremendous opportunity.
Thank you so much, Secretary Hunter. It was great to have you share some of the work that we're involved in, some of the focus and priorities that we have ahead, and especially coming out of the last couple of days working with tribal leaders at the Centennial Accord, and highlighting some of the things that we have heard and some of the partnerships that we're engaged with in other state agencies to help address some of those needs. So thank you for your time today. Hopefully we'll see you around later throughout the rest of the conference. It's a great agenda, and for everybody else, we're looking forward to a quick overview of what to expect the next couple of days. So I'll ask Angela if you could go to the next slide. I just want to direct your attention to our schedule. Our first general session, you'll have the option to choose between 2 breakout sessions, and the links to this and the full detailed agenda we'll put in the chat here. But in case you get lost from this and need to sign out and come back later, you can always go to our homepage on the Tribal Relations, DCYF, Office of Tribal Relations, and under the training section, we have all of this information there too. So that could be an easy go-to place. So thank you, Kelly, for also sharing this in the chat. So we'll continue with breakouts throughout the day, and you can choose the content that best fits your kind of needs and your area of practice, or maybe you want to go into a place where you want to learn something just a little bit different that is not within your normal practice. We are working on recordings. So the next 2 days will be recorded, and our communications team will be working to get all those recorded sessions uploaded to our YouTube channel after the conference. And if you're interested in CEUs, please do email us at dcyf.tribalrelations@dcyf.wa.gov. We'll put that in the chat as well. If you take any photos during the next 2 days, please feel free to share in your social media, hashtag ICYF 2023. So with that, some additional general announcements. We are going to be raffling off some door prizes of Sandy Whitehawk's book, A Child of the Indian Race, A Story of Return. So the more presentations you join and participate, the higher your chances of winning. Sandy's book we'll hear more about in the keynote, but is an amazing story that explores the trauma caused by Native removals and the adoptions and the tools for reconciliation and rebuilding community connections. So excited. So we're just a few minutes away from that. With that, we'll go through the next couple of slides to be able to just share with you an overview of what else to expect today. After the keynote, we'll also have 2 choices, and one of those is to join a session with Chinoa Igawa, who shares Qigong. I hope I'm saying it right. I have so much to learn and have been fascinated with this practice that Chinoa Igawa shares. She's become a master instructor. She's also a Native author. She's a member of the Lummi Nation, is also Jamestown S'Klallam. Looking forward to that session, as well as another option, which will be facilitated by Dr. Martina Wilshola and Dr. LaPlante, who will share on the community-wide mental health training for tribal communities. So we'll skip through, Angela, to 2 more slides so we can get caught up here. There we go. There's this one. So both of those will be happening concurrently. Then the next slide, we do have a couple of other options later in the day. So we'll be looking at the warning signs of online grooming, as well as DCYF's and juvenile rehabilitation's response during COVID-19. Then moving on to the next part of the day, you'll have an option to join the amazing Heidi Walker and all of the great work that her and her team are doing in the Native American Inquiry Unit and Relative Search Program, who's been tasked with developing, managing, and overseeing DCYF's Indian Child Welfare Legal Unit, and as well as our NAIR programs. The other option is to join in Treehouse's education programs and tribal engagement. Treehouse has been a great partner, and we're super excited about the services that they provide for children in foster care, supporting them in their education and helping to launch our children to pursue their dreams and launch successfully into adulthood. So tribal education specialists will be joining that track and sharing more about the services that they provide. Then the next option that we have is whether it's hip hop, R&B, country rock, young people love music. And as a part of our effort to reach the youth where they're at, the Healing Lodge uses an expressive arts program to engage residents, songwriting with music development and recording alongside traditional treatment. So we'll get to learn about that program and the residents' unique opportunity to write and produce their own songs. Super excited to hear about this and the wonderful resource tools and supports that support them in their recovery and healing. So the next slide we have is just some additional reminders. The Zoom links are again on the OTR training website. We'll continue to drop them in the chat, and the one-page agenda will also be shared in the chat as well. So we have just a couple of minutes left. So before we move on to our keynote, I just want to raise my hands and say a huge thanks to our conference organizer, Cassie Anderson, who is our new Office of Tribal Relations Operations Manager. It's been so exciting to work with Cassie. She just started with us in the last handful of months and has hit the ground running and has just been a wealth of resource and knowledge. We're so excited to have Cassie in her leadership role working with us and has just done an amazing job of putting this conference together. So thank you so much, Cassie, for the next couple of days and for getting us here today. So lots of love for you in the chat and lots of hearts and celebration. With that, we get to see some of the great connections that we've established to be able to bring together a all-star lineup of presenters. I'll share that I attended the NICWA conference this last year in Reno and just had the pleasure of meeting our keynote speaker, Sandy Whitehawk. And I met her and instantly felt like she is somebody who I admire, respect, and love like an auntie, and was able to purchase her book, A Child of the Indian Race, and even got her to sign it. So thankful for the time to be able to meet Sandy and for the time that she has set aside to join us today. I'll share a quick intro of Sandy Whitehawk, who is Sikangu. Apologies, I need to learn how to make sure I say the tribal name correct here, is a Lakota adoptee from the Rosebud Reservation, South Dakota. She is the founder and the director of the First Nations Repatriation Institute. The FNRI, the First Nations Repatriation Institute, is the first organization of its kind whose goal is to create a resource for First Nations people impacted by foster care or adoptions to return home, reconnect, and reclaim their identity. The Institute also serves as a resource to enhance the knowledge and skills of practitioners who serve First Nations people. Sandy organizes truth, healing, reconciliation community forums that bring together adoptees, fostered individuals and their families and professionals with the goal to identify post-adoption issues and to identify strategies that will prevent the removal of First Nations children. She has also initiated an ongoing support group for adoptees and birth relatives in the Twin Cities area. Sandra is the elder in residence at the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and is a consultant trainer for the Tribal Training Certification Program at the University of Duluth, Minnesota. Sandra has become a spokesperson on the issues of the adoption and foster care system and how it's impacted First Nations people. She's traveled throughout the US, Canada, Costa Rica, and Japan, and Alaska, sharing her inspirational story of healing. She served as the commissioner for the Maine Wabanaki State Child Welfare Truth and Reconciliation Commission and served as the honorary witness of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on Residential Schools in Canada. She serves on the boards of Legal Rights Center of Minneapolis and the Association of American Indian Affairs. She may look familiar to you as you have probably seen her in some of the documentaries which she's been the subject of in Dawnland, which we did premiere last year and showed also the last 2 years, premiered 2 years ago, and last year we shared as well as the documentary, The People's Protectors, as seen on PBS, and Blood Memory. She is a contributing author to The Outsiders Within, writing on transracial adoption, parenting as adoptees, the Kinship Parenting Toolbox. And as you know, today we're sharing the story author of A Child of the Indian Race, A Story of Return. Sandra has received the following awards: the Gary B. Melton Visiting Professor Award from the Kemp Center and Harav Institute from Israel, the Child Welfare Leadership Award, Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare, the NICWA Champion for Children Award, the Women in Wellbriety Dana Tiger Award for creating change in nations. Named one of the innovators in Color Lines magazine. Named one of the 50 visionaries who are changing your world. Named Outstanding Native Woman Award from the University of Minnesota. Named one of the 50 most influential and cool people. Love that award, and so thankful to have Sandy Whitehawk joining us today. Everybody join us in a warm welcome and appreciation for her time. And with that, we're so happy to have you here, Sandy. We'll hand it over to you. Oh, you're on mute. So good to see you, though. So happy you're here. There
For
you
some
are.
reason, for some reason, I think the person other end, I can never remember who's in charge. So I thought they just had me on mute. And thank you. I know, I should put phonetically right behind Sichangu so people would know how are you supposed to know how to, I never even thought of that. But thank you for that. Sometimes when I hear people read the bio, I just kind of go, God, really? Did I, was I blessed to be able to participate in so many incredible things? And so I just I just always want to share what I've learned and what I've seen. And but thank you for having me be here. I'm going to figure out my screen here. Whoa, I'm getting strobe lights. What happened? Something happened. Anyway, okay. Share screen. But I have to I'm so sorry. I came on thinking that I was going to do this with someone before I did this. So somebody tell a joke while I figure out how I do this.
Oh, thank you. And if you want, we could help if you want to share it with us.
Yeah, I can.
Email.
How do I do that?
I'll give you our email. Let's see.
In the chat, so I can. Oh, yeah.
Oops, let's see here.
I might be able to just figure this out. I just got to get to my thingy. Okay, there's the PowerPoint. And put on ready to go. Slideshow from the beginning. Now I just have to be able to share screen. Got it. I think I talked myself through it.
What do you call an Indian with no lips?
What?
Pointless.
Yes. Good one. Thank you. Thank you. Someone. All right. I got it. All right. Hopefully I have. Yeah. All right. So, somebody say your name, sir, that said that joke. We got to credit you for that.
Rudy.
Rudy, where are you from, Rudy?
Dihatagan Hadislanist using Tsimshian way. I'm from the Haida Tsimshian of Alaska.
Oh, all right. Our most northern relatives. Yes. Thank you for that. All right. So I like to frame a history, what happened, what it was like, what happened, and what is it like now. And during this, if you have a question, if you want to put them in the chat, you can, but if somebody from your team, Talina, could stop and say we have a question, I would appreciate that. I think the questions should be during and not after, because it's fresh on your mind, and so I don't mind that. I don't see that as an interruption at all. So, and in my book, I wrote my book in the same concept of truth, healing, reconciliation. So a lot of what I'm sharing here is in the book. So it just more in depth. And anyway, so I want to just start truth, healing. So it says that I have to admit people. It keeps coming up, admit. Am I the only one that does that now?
Oh, sorry. We have you as a co-host, so we'll get them in there. Sorry.
Okay, just want to make sure that they're in here. Woohoo, this is fun. I don't know what the heck we're doing, but we're doing it. All right. So I start out with always remembering that this is a spiritual endeavor that we're doing, that we can't come at child welfare just with our intellect. We have to come in the way that we are as Indian people. We do everything with mind, body, spirit. So on the left of the screen, as you look at it, is Joe Bush, who is now no longer with us, but who was so incredibly encouraging, as he was the spiritual advisor, or one of the spiritual advisors of the White Earth Nation. And he helped us with laying the foundation of the White Earth Nation, welcoming their relatives home who've been separated through adoption and foster care, and are making sure that our birth relatives also knew that they are part of that circle. And he's working here with Jerry Dearly on my right, who is the man who made the song that started and has led our work since we began. And so they're coming together, and it was a really powerful time to just watch them think and decide how they wanted to take care of and nurture our individuals who would be processing all day much heartache, but also we experienced much nurturing and a lot of joy in the end. So it's always important to recognize and use our knowledge keepers, our wisdom keepers, because that's the foundation of who we are as a people. Now, how come I won't go forward? I'm supposed to be able to just hit my button and go forward. Does anybody have? Admit. Can someone tell me why oh, I'm not pushing my button hard. The heck? I was going to say, I just tested this before I got on here. What next? The truth. Seems like a simple concept, doesn't it? People don't like the truth. They really don't like the truth. One of the things that we have to learn in participating in our circles is to listen to the truth and not try to do anything to dismiss it, to make it feel better, to do anything. I love that one of our elders who worked with us in northern Minnesota, the truth is the truth and can't be changed. And how do we work with that truth is what's important. So I like to just remind us that we can't talk about child welfare today without first talking about child welfare's first policy, which was boarding school. Every time I look at this, I go, I got to change this picture, because what it should really look like is our grandmas and grandpas today. Because those that are 70-ish and above, 65-ish, they've experienced boarding school. So this is a present day. Still, we are recovering from what has happened. But it really was the first child welfare policy, even though they may not have said this is our official first child welfare policy, but it certainly was, where families had no choice. They were just removed. The impact of boarding school, I lay it out in 4 categories: individuals, families, tribal communities, and tribal nations. Now, under each of these categories, we could spend a whole day talking about what happens to an individual who experienced boarding school from age 6 and let's say 17. The average age of departure was around 14 to 17. But think of all the developmental disruptions that happened as a result of being in an institutionalized and often physically brutal and emotionally devastating situation, day in and day out, for not just a week or a month, but years. Years. What does that do to their self-esteem? You know, they lose a sense of who they are. And we talk about trauma all the time today. Man, we are so trauma centered. We got to get trauma informed and trauma. And yet we don't really realize how it affected a person's ability to think, for them to connect. And we're not healing informed. We need to be healing informed. So anybody who came out of boarding school, especially during that time period, were just like prisoners of war too. So just that individual, thousands of individuals coming out of an institutionalized place like that, and then into our economically deprived communities. What did the government and anyone expect to happen to us? What did they expect? I think they got what they expected, nearly destroyed us. And notice I said nearly, they didn't, we're still here. But families lose their parental power, the near destruction of our extended family system. And that parental power you can still see played out today. If you have families in your caseload, and because I've heard social workers say this, families are so apathetic, they just don't even care. Well, they're still responding probably to something within their family that has disrupted their ability to stay connected, make connections, stay connected, able to nurture themselves, nurture their family, protect their family. And so they get, a child protection case on them. And that automatically, many of them think, well, this is the end. No matter what I do, it's not going to help. And that's not someone trying to be uncooperative. That's not someone who doesn't want the help. That's someone who's responding to hit the trauma in their life. And they need healing, but they don't even know what they need healing from. So we have to really remember and where the origin of this this connection that we see to that original disruption of our families. So we lose our sense of community, and it weakens tribal structure and deletes numbers for enrollment. And ultimately, that's what boarding school's purpose was, is they wanted to access land. It's always land and resources. And that would be one way to do that. So same thing, sorry about that. So after boarding school, community governments became aware of what they would say was an abject poverty on the reservations, and saw that individuals were drinking a lot and having a hard time. And they came in and said, well, you're neglecting your children. You're not taking care of your children. But let's go back to, how did they know how to take care of children? Where did they learn that? And why are they using alcohol in the way that they are? We know that alcohol is a numbing. So what I want us to remember in working with families today, I'll put this other one back up here. The impact of removal from adoption is just about the exact same thing as through adoption. Loss of identity and foster care. All the things that have happened, separation does that to you. And it was the one time that the government said, well, let's just go ahead and give churches some money, even though there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. And so that didn't happen. And churches were used to remove children. My adoption is a result of a congregation that was focused on removing children. And unfortunately, even a Native pastor who really believed he was doing the right thing. So children during this time period on reservations were being removed because of no electricity, no running water, too many people in a room, on and on and on. Well, what I really, to this day, I just want to cuss because it still makes me so mad that churches weren't going, oh, running water's all they need to keep their babies? Well, let's work together and dig a well. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they help them in any other way that they needed help? Why couldn't they see how broken some of our people were after 12 years in an institution, coming out and then having children. Do you know that as a species, we are the only mammal that know to take care of our children? Bears, eagles, robins, worms, snakes, every mammal has the built-in system. They know how much food to bring their offspring. They know when to slow it down so that eventually the bird can fly on its own and the bear company, learns to do things on their own. That's all innate in them. We don't have that. So to us, we have to remember that then, that if someone isn't taking care of their child, it's most likely they don't know how. And then you say, well, how can they not know in this time period in life that people gotta know, everybody? Well, then why are there still baby books coming out? There's always, every few years, somebody's got another thing that we should be doing with babies. And they publish a book. And, oh my God, we never thought of this before. Because we're constantly learning and we need each other to learn. But I really am trying to stress to you, and part of the reason I'm stressing this to you, I didn't put as much of this part in my book. And I wish I had, as the only regret I have is because I was a mother who was addicted and neglected my child. And I don't know how child welfare didn't get involved. Probably because the mandating and everything isn't as intense as it is now. Now it's like too intense. They've gone overboard. But I did all those things that should have her removed. And I say this not to get you to feel bad for me, I just want you to know that I wasn't who I was meant to be at age 20, 21. Well, I had her when I was 24, 24 and 25 and 26. At the age I should have known better, I did not know how to take care of a child because I was removed at 18 months old. I remember the day they took me and put me in that truck. I have a complete recall of it, but my recall is me watching this little brown girl get put between two white people. So at 18 months old, I disassociated. And I disassociated until I was 11 years old. And I remember quite a few of them. And so because I was put in a home where I was sexually abused and physically abused and spiritually abused, I mean, once I could do drugs and get high, I mean, that helped a little bit. So I had PTSD from that. And we're not talking to our families in a way that explains why they are reacting and doing what they're doing. And families don't come in to say, oh, I need help. My mom and dad were in boarding school and this is what's wrong with me. No, they don't do that. They have no idea. They love their families and want to protect their families like everyone else. And there's nothing, that's a normal response. But I want to stress that to you, that the people who are coming before you who need help don't know what they need help for. And they need the love of our culture, the nurturance of our songs, and the encouragement that our grandmas give. But anyway, I want you to understand and know how adoption was exactly like boarding school in the way that it was done in these earlier years. And I put 1978. I should take that off there because we're still getting systematic removal of our kids. But in Hannibal, Michigan, I was present and heard firsthand accounts of who was taken. And so I'll say that much, that I heard this directly from individuals who were impacted. Back in the 50s and 60s, the way families supported themselves was mothers and fathers would go into the woods where the small reservation was, harvest pulpwood, and sell it, and that's how they made their money. And because social services knew that's what was going on, and they left the older children with the younger children. And when they found that out, they went in, just roomed house to house. And I remember this one lady sharing that a shiny black car drove into the driveway. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard this one, that about the shiny black car. So it was a government car, drove in and came to the door. And this one lady was saying, she was still crying. I was saying, why did I open the door? Because her and her brothers were removed and placed in adoption. And at this time, she's 65-ish years old. And she's just weeping and saying, why did I open the door? Should have never opened the door. And, we just reassured her, sweetie, you were 11. You would have had no power, and they would have just come in no matter what. But that's what they did. They went door to door and removed almost all the children out of that little community in Hannahville, Michigan, charged all the parents with child neglect, and all those children were adopted out. And that's just one community. And I tell that story because I was in Hannahville listening to those who experienced it. But people will say, well, there was just an adoption project, and that's where all the kids are adopted out of. No, it isn't the way. They were only responsible for 395 adoption placements. And after that, they started educating Lutheran social services and Catholic social services and other agencies on how to target us and remove us. So we have the exact same, like I said, we have the little self-esteem, not being able to see your image reflected to you in any way, shape, or form in your home, in your community. You really grow up in an emotional isolation. And birth mothers and fathers, we never even hear anything from them. They just walk away in shame, being told they're unfit, being told, all kinds of things. I've read some of the records from saying, I can't believe what people have said. And they were supposed to be social workers who were be helping us. So many adoptees having over the years to try to get their sealed adoption records. And sometimes they're incorrect. And so we believe too that at some point records were changed on purpose so that there wouldn't be a reconnect. Imagine living with that your whole life, not knowing who you are, where you come from. And so what do you think will happen to the children born to this generation of people who were taken away? Right? They have the same, especially so what I started hearing and seeing were so many people were talked about abuse in their adoptive homes. And I'm like, geez, because I remember thinking, well, nobody would have gone through what I went through. I was just some weird fluke. And come to find out, no, it was not a weird fluke. And that even if a person came from a loving home, a healthy, loving, stable home with parents that have a good emotional IQ, they still felt deep grief and loss. And in fact, because there was so much unconditional love, the adoptee is afraid to say, but this isn't enough. I need to know who I am. So love cannot give you that. Love cannot give you that identity. Doesn't matter how you love, what kind of love, it just isn't going to do it. We need to see ourselves. That's why it's so important that our family preservation be the ultimate goal. All right. Oops, sorry about that. So here's my, I'll tell you just a little bit more about my story, but there's me shortly after I was placed in the family that adopted me. I don't look very happy. I have very, very, very few pictures of me at this age, so I don't mind using this one. But what I always remember is just from the very beginning, hiding from my white adoptive mother. My father, I have wonderful memories of him. He died, though, when I was 6 years old. So the person who was going to protect me was gone and just left with my mother, who I say all the things that she did. And, man, that even makes people uncomfortable. Your mother did the best she could, blah, whatever. And I think, yeah, she did do the best she could in a an untreated mental illness, yeah, I have pity for that. But several truths can exist at once. And her disease did that to me, period, right? And so, and I found that many adoptees have this same experience. And so then I started going down the road of how come we're not checking in on these adoptive homes? How come? And I think part of the reason that we don't check in with them is that adoption's based in property law. So once the deal is sealed, the deal is sealed and nobody can go in and check and see how we're doing. And I don't even know if that would fix anything for a child that's getting abused in a home or not, but I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I really didn't. But I'll tell you, I developed a skill that many adoptees do, and we sure as hell know how to act as if everything's okay. One of the first adoptee gatherings I had, I remember standing in front of a whole room full of adoptees and I went, "How's everybody doing? Fine?" And they all like laughed and shook their head because that's what, "Not fine. It's okay. Yeah. I just got molested, but you know, it's my fault. I shouldn't have done that." And that's the reality of so many of us. So if you get my book, then you can read all that. I'm not going to go into super detail. You got to buy my book and read it. It's not even $20 to purchase, man. Not even $20. And it's not all horrible. There's a happy ending. There's lots of good joy in it. But the first 3 chapters, I will say, are pretty sad. Although I didn't think about it that way because that's my life. I'm used to it. I'm kind of like, you know. But my niece was reading it and she calls me and goes, "Oh my God, Auntie, I had no idea it was this sad. This is so sad." And I go, "It is sad. It is sad." I said, "But keep reading. The next section says healing. So keep going." But go ahead and check it out. So what is healing anyway? You know, for me, I was really fortunate that going home in 1988, and I talk about in the book, I describe the incident that pushed me to be able to find my family. Because one of the things many adoptees experience is deep fear on even looking for who you are. Where do I start? You know, what am I going to do? And so the fact that I even found a place where my adoption was, you know, brought to my attention that it could be this. And then I didn't know that there was a Indian community in Madison, Wisconsin, where I was living. And how would I know? Most white families are not part of an Indian community. They don't know. They don't have white friend or Indian friends. There's no connection. And so I had been living in Madison 20 some years and didn't know there were other Indians in Madison, Wisconsin. And so I end up finding that. And just real quickly, I'll just say, belonging to a 12-step group, I was 7 years sober by 1988. And that person came into the doors of those 12-step doors, and she happened to be Native, and there it was. And that's how I met people in Wisconsin and got connected. But I wouldn't have known any otherwise. But flash forward like about 10 years, I have met the Indian community. I started working at a college and was the Native American student advisor, and got to learn how to organize powwows. I'm a veteran, so I got asked and invited to be in the Oneida Nation Color Guard. Lots of great experiences with them, just really mending wounds with not even having to talk about the wounds. Just being, just hanging out, just eating chili and fry bread, laughing, telling jokes. Nothing like, wow, you know. No, it wasn't that at all. It was quiet acknowledgement if something did come out, and then just moving on. We are the best social workers to each other. I think maybe we are the originators of how to nurture and how to bring healing with just our values of having pity and being generous. And that doesn't mean with money. with our spirit, with our time, giving rides to powwows. But anyway, so in 1999, I'm like feeling amazing. Like I didn't have any trauma clouds hanging over my head. I was just at Rosebud Fair. You know, I would go home every year. My uncle said, make here. That's when you're going to meet your rest of your relatives who don't live here. They all come home for Rosebud Fair. And so my mother was the oldest of 20 children. So I was always meeting relatives every year, and I'm still meeting cousins. That's a lot of uncles and aunts, man. And my uncles had a construction company, so they traveled and met and married women from across the Indian country. So I got relatives everywhere. I was just in Tulalip a few months ago and met a cousin, and we're like, and it was so crazy because I said, even if I didn't know you were my cousin, I would have been staring at you because you talk just like your dad. You know, there's all these things, genetic things that you see, especially those of us who've been separated. We see everything, you know. But anyway, so in 99, I'm walking around the powwow just feeling good and going, oh my God, thank you, Creator. Thank you. It's just joy, right? Nothing preoccupying me at all other than to have fun. And I go and I sit next to this elder lady who my brother introduced me to, Clara Ferguson. And she was just the coolest. She was so much fun. Anyway, we were sitting there. She goes, hey, I thought you were dancing. You know, you got your braids on and everything. I go, yeah, I'm going to dance tonight. Okay, she said, here, sit, I'll tell you some stories. And I'm like, she's going to volunteer to just tell me. She goes, I was thinking about how things are today. You young people didn't know how to really 49. And I'm like, what? That's what you want to tell. That's the after party. For those who don't know, that's the after party after a powwow. She's like in her 80s and she's telling me stories of her youth and how things happened and kissing behind shawls and all this stuff. And it was just the sweetest moment. It just really was. And I was giggling, going, this never happens. You don't just sit down and somebody tells you stuff. But anyway, then I teased her and I said, oh, Clara, I just love elders. I love sitting with elders. I said, you know why? And I said, why? I said, in about a half hour, it's going to be break time and they're going to serve food. I'll run over and I'll get you a bowl. But I love it because I get me one too. And so I was telling her I'd hang with her the rest of the powwow and take care of her. And we were so just laughing at silly stuff like that. And so when the session closed, the afternoon session closed, they said, well, or just before it closed, they go, okay, just before we're closed, we're going to have a special. And we looked at each other and went, oh, man, because a special could take an hour, right? I mean, and then when are we going to eat? Just all our concern. We weren't anything other than we're going to eat and tell stories. So they brought out a gentleman who was a Korean War veteran, a member of the community, and they brought all his stuff out for the giveaway. And I was like, oh, Lord, this is going to take a long time because Lakotas give away horses and cars and on and on and on during specials. We're thinking this is going to take forever. But that is so crazy that where I'm at in my head juxtaposed of what was really happening and about to happen. And so, oh, and then the couple, because they're elderly, just shuffle around our huge arena, which also adds time. It seemed like everything that was happening was slowing everything down, which is where it's supposed to be anyway, and not in this white concept of time where we got to schedule, hello, we got to get this done. And anyway, we're watching them and him and his companion making their way around. And man, the song was beautiful. And I asked Clara, I said, what are they singing? This sounds such a beautiful song. She goes, oh, this is a really old veteran song. And what they're saying is, thank you for what you've done for us. They're saying that to the veterans. Thank you, what you've done. Then I noticed at certain points when they did the 4 honor beats, the people would raise their hands and or their fans. And I said, Clara, why are they doing that? They don't do that in Wisconsin. You know, every region does their special is a little different. And she said, oh, well, that's saying we recognize, acknowledge, and honor. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, and so when the next round of honor beats, she comes, she says, now we're going to recognize and acknowledge our veterans who are far from us right now. They're doing that job that keeps them away from their families and their communities. And that's a sacrifice in itself. So we're thinking of them as we're listening to this song. And I thought, but dang, and then another round of honor beats comes. And just as that was happening too, the couple was getting, like 3/4 away around the arena. The sun was in that place where backlighting happens, and the gold hue was just popping. It was so beautiful, and that old song sounded old, so like, I guess ancient, just sounded so old. And for just a moment, it felt like nothing bad had ever happened to us, ever, like that. It was so, I wish I could put it in words. That's the closest thing I got, is that nothing has ever happened to us. We're just here in this beauty and in this strength. Then these honor beats come, and she goes, now those veterans who are making their way home, they're done with their service and they're coming home, and we're saying, welcome home. We're glad you're here. And that's when it hit me. As soon as she said that, I went, I have never heard that for adoptees, ever. And I'd been, powwowing a lot by then, and been to Canada, different places, and we got all kind of songs, started out with horse stealing songs, and then went to naming songs and all the kinds of songs that we have, graduation songs. We don't have a song, we make a song, right? And I started thinking, what if when we used that song, we asked all the relatives who've been separated to come out so we could acknowledge them, and our relatives who gave us life to come out so we could acknowledge them and speak to that collective wound that's happened to us, and have that song. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then I thought, who the hell are you, Sandy Whitehawk? What do you know about anything? I was just going, oh shit, it's going to take forever to do this. I was not a big person who should be involved in anything like that kind. And so I just kept it to myself. I was like, just shut up, Sandy, sit down and listen. And then it's a longer story, but I have to leave that out. I ended up meeting a man who was at the time the spiritual advisor to the National Indian Child Welfare Association, Chris Leith, Dakota Korean War veteran, healer, Sundance leader, just an amazing man. And I ended up telling him what I just told you guys, and some a little bit more deeper. And I felt like even when I told him, because I didn't mean to tell him, he just said, what'd you do did you go home to the powwow? How was it? Did you have fun? And it just came out of me. And as it was coming out of me, I was wanting to put the words back in my mouth going, oh my God, I cannot be telling this healer. And why don't we have a song for adoptees? So I felt so like out of line, right? Disrespect or something. And I remember he was eating eggs, and he just goes, because we were out for breakfast, and he goes, you're right. There should be a song. There should be a song. I'll have Jerry Dearly make a song. We'll bring it out. And he literally had a plan. Boop, 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 in like 3 minutes. And then he says to me, you've got to get to the NICWA conference. It'll be next month. And I go, what's NICWA? And he looks at me and he goes, you know what Indian Child Welfare Act is? I go, nope. He goes, well, you got to educate yourself, girl. And so it started my mentoring with him, and him putting together what we do for our relatives as a healing to bring them back into the circle. Started on that day at that eating eggs. He goes, you better give me some tobacco because you've had a vision. And I remember even saying, this is how goofy I was at the time. I go, so like, how can that be a vision? Shouldn't I have been on a hill somewhere and hungry? And he goes, no. He says, the Creator will place in your heart what you're meant to do when you're ready. And I still kind of didn't get it. But anyway, as we started going around to communities and talking with relatives who've been separated, talking to elders in community, I started noticing, some commonalities. And so that is just, some of it. But then I started noticing, wait a minute, there's some trauma responses here happening. And this is back just in 2000, 2001. So when I was talking like this, people just looked at me and went blink, 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 like, who the hell is this maladjusted adoptee? She's just not, adjusted or whatever. And I thought, no, people are sharing that they have, this deep, deep grief, unresolved grief. And so now, fast forward a few years, we thank Dr. Yellow Horse Braveheart for actually putting it in a definition, right? However, our relatives were experiencing this disenfranchised grief, a grief that's not been acknowledged. And I went, oh, that's what we're acknowledging when we bring people into the center. And that healing comes from validating their separation and what may have happened in that separation. And that begins to heal the mind and the spirit. And then you make connections after that, which begins a healing. But so as far as what to call what we were doing on the social work side and not ceremonial side, because there were, those two, we were in Fort Thompson, invited to come to this elders group to talk. And I had no idea in 2003 or 4 where the thought and concept came of truth and reconciliation to me. I just remember thinking, Chris, people that have been adopted, people that are birth relatives, need to tell in a way, like in a circle, to people who make decisions about adoption and foster care, what is the outcome of these decisions? They need to hear that because they're still thinking they did the right thing. And clearly it's not. So I was talking to them saying that I wanted to start bringing people together for this. And this grandma spoke up, and me or my friend could not remember who her name is, but it was a Dakota grandma from Fort Thompson. And I remember her saying to me, don't talk about truth and reconciliation without including healing. If no healing takes place, no reconciliation takes place. And she said that in 1999, Governor Rounds made that year the year of reconciliation, and to improve relationships between tribal government and the South Dakota government. And she said, nobody came here to hear anything. No healing took place, no reconciliation took place. So I thought, well, all right, we'll call it truth, healing, reconciliation. But what is reconciliation? People fight about this, y'all. They get into big, long arguments. What is reconciliation? We can't be reconciled if we've never been conciled. How do you reconcile genocide? I mean, it just goes on and on and on because we've never done it. So it's how do you do it? So reconciliation, what I learned, begins with the individual, meaning whatever you're doing, you're not leading people into something because you need just as much reconciliation as the people you're bringing in. So the truth part's pretty easy to take those first steps if you have a community forum, hearing from them and letting them share. And the healing comes from using our songs and ceremony, our encouraging and validating what their root truth is. But the reconciliation begins after that and is ongoing as you address the things that you heard in this circle. So it isn't like, bam, now we're reconciled. No, it isn't. It's not an event. It's a process. Oh, this just describes what I just said about our forums. So it is not an event. It's a process. And what happens in that process is whatever inner dialogue you got going on during those times will reveal to you how much work do you still have on yourself to do in bringing people together. And what can we learn in these circles? You can learn an amazing amount. You can learn what not only what not to do, but maybe even how to do it differently, all in one session. It's pretty amazing. Let's see. So what I've witnessed in doing our circles is ultimately that grief of one. So here's, I'll give you an example. So I was being led by this man, Chris Leaf, who had an amazing ability to just stay in his own skin, not be judgmental. I mean, he just was amazing. And he really understood and knew how we could heal each other by bringing us together. So, but as I was following his mentoring, one time we had a community forum here in Minnesota, and it was for foster youth. And the foster youth were aged 13 to 17. And there were some faculty members from the University of Minnesota there, community members, and social workers and the like. And we were working with the youth. Ultimately, the goal was that the providers would hear what was really happening in their county to their foster youth. And as you can imagine, there were horrible stories. But what I learned in this one circle, I share all the time because I learned something deeper about myself, and to what I had to learn to trust. And it was pretty amazing. So we had a small group together on the whole event was between 60 and 65 individuals. In our small groups, we would break them down so that people had enough time to talk. We're in small groups. So in our little small group, and for this particular initiative, it was, we wanted the foster youth to share one thing that happened to them in foster care that they wanted a social worker to know. And that was one way of also honing it down to not a whole story. So this one youth is 17, and he describes being in foster care since he was very young, 2 or 3 years old, the multiple homes that he had been in, the multiple times he'd been sexually violated, beaten, neglected. He said, but out of all of that, every year, I wanted to talk to my mom on my birthday. And I never got to. No social worker has ever contacted my mom on my birthday. And I'm like, I'm getting mad. I'm like, of course they didn't. This is my internal dialogue. Of course they didn't. White social workers don't give a crap about us. And I was going on like that. That is the truth of what was happening in my dialogue. And I know not to say anything. I know not to disrupt anything. I just know to hold that circle. So I'm standing there, but I see then just across this little circle, this white-haired social worker whose shoulders are starting to go up and down, and she's holding her head and she's crying because we all just heard what happened to this young man. And he said, all I wanted to do is talk to my mom on my birthday. He didn't focus on any of the abuses. And she goes, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I've done that. You could just see her guilt was, coming out. She felt bad. And I was thinking, okay, is there anything I can do to, don't just stand here, get the sage out. She goes, I just don't know what to, I don't know. And she kept saying that over and over. And I can imagine, could you imagine as a social worker hearing this? And then the solution was, all I wanted was to talk to my mom. And in my brain, I'm thinking, oh yeah, they never called because mom was just an addict. Kid can't talk to an addict mom. Mom doesn't care. All this stuff that gets jumbled up in what we think kids need and what they want. And then all of a sudden that young man stands up, takes a couple steps across the circle, just real gently on her shoulder, goes, "Now you know different." Took a few steps back and sat down. I felt like a fucking bonehead, you guys. Because that was not my dialogue. My dialogue was judgmental. You should cry. You should feel bad. All of that. Yeah, and she should feel bad. But when we have guilt, guilt is something we can do something about. When we have shame, we're frozen. We can't do anything when we have shame, and we've internalized something that doesn't belong to us with shame. I've had people say, those were just white tears, and you just let that lady steal the moment from the child. I've been told that so many times. I go, yeah, right. Yeah, you were there. You saw that. No, I don't say that. But I do gently say, no, ma'am, or no, sir, you were not there. You didn't see and you didn't feel that moment. There was nothing. He gave her something. He didn't take nothing away, like take her guilt away or anything. Only she can address that. But he gave her a really assurance. He used his experience to say, now you know better. And he sat down. I mean, that was so amazing, you guys. He had a strength there. And he had a sense of purpose for that moment. All the crap he'd gone through. So he doesn't just affect that social worker. There were other social workers in this circle as well. And I always think that was 10 years of therapy for everybody. Everybody. And so those are the kinds of things that can happen. And I tell that story because I want you to know that if you start going into wanting to do events like this, you are going to be faced with your own biases and your own issues. And that's good. That's good. But you do have to, what do you do with them? You know, to strengthen yourself and to assure others in the long run. But then I noticed there wasn't any research out on us. And so many policy folks go, well, we have to have research. Oral history is not enough for us. And I mean it sarcastically. I said it sarcastically, and I mean it sarcastically. Anyway, I thought, well, what can we do about that? This is the only thing that existed before ours was published in 2012. And Susan Harness, this wasn't even a PhD study. I just put that up here because I thought it was the best master's thesis I had read. And it's good stuff. Everyone else, split feather study, we don't call adoptees split feathers. That's another whole presentation. But everyone just interviewed 20 people. And I said, we need more than that. We gotta really knock it out of the park if we're going to do it. So we put together a survey. This is how we dispersed it. This is our team of individuals who are participants, readers, helping get things out. Yeah, I did that. But who responded were 336 adoptees across all races. Because I wanted that. I wanted to get a pool of people so we could compare and look at what are the outcomes for, say, white adoptees versus Native adoptees. And then we looked further down, chiseling down, and 129 said they were First Nations individuals, but 95 said that they had been in contact, some reunited completely, some with their birth relatives. And here's who responded, mostly women. Here's what the better life we were given in education. And here's our typical income and our age, 50 years old average. Here's our findings. Drink that in. And it's got to be frustrating for people who do adoption, because you're thinking to yourself, well, we did a background check. Yeah, but our background checks don't include uncles and aunts and cousins and on and on and on, and who could eventually get access in the family to the child. But why is it so high? And physical abuse and emotional abuse. And so initially, a couple of people on the research team, a couple of our non-native people said, "Oh, Sandy, I don't know if you're going to like seeing the results." And I go, "I know what they're going to be. I've already been talking to people. It's not going to be something, it's going to confirm what we see, what we know anecdotally. I want you to look at this. I want you to take a picture." The very first times I shared this, literally people would just sit and blink, blink, blink. And I know it's because they don't know what to do. What do we do? What do we do different? Well, I don't know. You're the one in adoption work. How do we slow it down? The only thing that comes to my mind is family preservation. Family preservation. We're not focused on family healing at all. Or if we are, you only have a certain timeline to get well. But we all know removal is trauma. So I look at this, 43 out of the 95 contemplated suicide and 20 attempted out of the 95. So suicide is pretty high among adoptees. And our depression rate is way above the average. That's because of the emotional isolation, you guys. No language you don't have a way to say it when you're the only person experiencing it in your family, your adoptive family, your placement. I didn't know. I certainly had no language for it. And here is our wordle from their narratives. They felt that they were called home. And that's amazing, because I have way too less of a time. I wish I could explain to you guys the ceremonies that go on year round, but especially in this spring and summertime. We always pray for our relatives, Wachoachage, that generation past, the present, and those yet to come. And we pray all the time for our relatives who aren't with us, all the time. So we tell our relatives who are returning, we say that you weren't forgotten. It felt like it, but you weren't. So here's the citation for that study. It's riveting reading. I say that jokingly because academic writing's boring. But anyway, you should check it out. So here's what I think the narrative of adoption has to really work to maintain itself, because it's a billion-dollar business now. And here, there's a study that came out of Minnesota. The site, you can look it up down here. I put that down there for you. But adoptees are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than non-adopted. 4 times, not just native adoptees across the board. And this dude that's the president of the National Council for Adoption, his response, just cold. Doesn't surprise me that children who've been adopted in great numbers have struggles, which I guess, if you took it to its natural consequences, would increase the suicide rate. But the thing I really comes out at me is it appears a vast majority of children are doing really well. So too bad about those others who just... Anyway, so what about our mothers? Do you know that there's not one study done on native birth mothers? Not one. So we'll be the first ones again. But we're finding that the birth mothers mirror the pain and trauma that our relatives, the babies that they lost. So the same thing, disenfranchised grief, not being able to say goodbye. There's a lot of coercion in adoption. Feeling deceived is a big one. I wish I had time to tell you what is still happening and how we still talk mothers out of their babies. We're still telling them, you don't have the resources. Well, then why are we not finding the resources? Damn it. If we can pay foster parents $1,400, why can't we take $1,400 and help mom get on her feet and stay there. The stories I've heard on how that coercion to give their baby up, the highest form of love is to give your child. Those are all horrible things to say. Everyone thinks those are the nurturing things to say. They're not. And then just a lifetime of grief with that. They worry every birthday they think of them and wonder. And they sign papers that says no contact. Well, some of them get scared and think, well, if I do go ahead and get contact, if it happens me, they're scared that's going to happen to them. I've heard first. I don't make any of this up, you guys. I talk to the individuals who are birth moms. Oh, and they have the same kind of health issues as well with the substance abuse and the anxiety. But for our study then that was published, my intent was that it would be used in county courts, that social workers would be working hard to say, oh, I know it looks grim, but we got to figure out a way to keep this child with their parent, because look what could possibly be happening to them based on this study. But nobody's done it yet that I know of. But Raquel called me and said, Sandy, didn't you do a study? And I go, yeah, actually we did. And she didn't tell me what it was for, but she said, can you send it to me? I sent it to her, and here she used it in a case to keep a family together. Oh my gosh. And I thought, oh, validation finally. And I love that it came from a Supreme Court. You know, here I'm crying around that no county court done it. But so I share it with you to say you could do this. And if you don't know how to use a study to part of, like, especially guardian ad litems who are have a heavy say in cases, let us know, and we will do a training for you on how to use, because we now have 8 papers published around the impacts of removal. Then imagine me being blown away as I'm in northern Minnesota on my way to Big Drum ceremony, and my friend calls me and says, Sandy, the ICWA's been upheld. I'm like, what? I was convinced it was going to go. I really was. I had no faith, none whatsoever. I said my prayer, but I even apologized to Creator. I said, I know I'm not having much faith here, but and then I get a text from my friend who's the head of the ABA, and she said, Sandy, they cited your study. I was like, what? I started crying. I said, no way, somebody found our study and used it? Oh, and he used one of our more recent papers called Abuse After Abuse. Oh, man. God bless his clerks who searched and looked. God bless Gorsuch, who I thought would never understand and see the importance of this, because I listened to the hearings. I was able to be in DC with a group full of tribal social workers and lawyers, not social workers, but lawyers. And the room was divided. Some had faith and most of them were real scared. But anyway, so there you have it. This gives you the opportunity to do whatever you got to do for an active effort. Think way outside the circle of possibility to help families stay together. I'll help you if you want. Call me. I'll give you an idea. So if you would also, we have to always go back to how did this all start? As I said, in boarding school, we have a bill that we are trying to get passed for a truth commission, so that we can get a good recording of accounting of all the schools, and also interview and record experiences from boarding school. So you'll find that information. That our website's really interesting. I'm telling you, I'm not one to go to websites, but I gotta say they did a really, really good job. And so, so here's the waiting for the House bill to be introduced. Oh, so much going on with that. But anyway, at least we're there and have way more support than I thought we would have in getting this passed. But we need you to go to our website and then find out who it is that you can nudge to move in and support our bill. So I want you to remember adoption and foster care. Not only, you know, because we can say that boarding school certainly did this, but adoption and foster care has created a collective wound, right? A collective wound is something that happened over a lifespan, and we know that that's what happened right after boarding school and is still happening. So if we have this collective wound, we just certainly need a collective healing, and are bringing our relatives home through a process of, you know, a community forum, which if you wanted to do that, I'll come help you do that. That's where community building and community healing begins to take place. And that's what we need to for our families. So just real quickly, just showing you that the White Earth Nation, I know there's supposed to be a comma after the 9. I fought to get it back in there, but nobody listened to me. It bugs me so bad every time I see that. But anyway, we have 2 days of coming together, sharing and talking with relatives about what it means to be from the White Earth Nation, to be Ojibwe, to learn how to say different things in Ojibwe, and how when people say, well, where are you from? We taught them to say, I am returning, meaning so that they would understand that they were being returning from having been removed. And then my tribe's first year we did it was in 2015. And this is the first year we did it since COVID. And a real quick story, I'm in the casino having, in the deli eating with my niece, and these 2 people come by, and I'd say they're in their 50s, early 50s. And we just said hi, you know, and then the guy starts asking us who we are, what families we knew, whatever. And he said, then I finally said, were you adopted or in foster care? And he goes, well, yeah, I am. I was adopted. And I go, oh, okay. And so we talked about who we believed his family to be. And then I just said, hey, so how long are you here for? This was Thursday. And I said, well, there's a powwow this weekend, and it's for our relatives who've been returning. I started talking to him. He's like, what? So he and his partner were able to attend. He meets his sister. Brother, the older brother of the sister and him, has passed recently. And here she got to meet her other brother, who she'd never seen because he was taken away as a baby. And she goes, look, I got to get permission for this. And I keep putting it off. But she goes, look, the Creator gave me my brother. Look, he even dresses like my other brother did. He had she put them side by side. And they had the exact same hat on. And it's just uncanny how much they looked like each other. And so that healing in that family can begin. So we brought them out into the center and do what we do to honor and bring that healing, and the community comes out. The healing part comes when the people come out. We never told people in the beginning, say, welcome home, or what they just do. They just said it, welcome home, welcome home. So that vision that I had was actually happening. And the first time it happened in Rosebud was 2015. And that's what blood memory covers. And I couldn't get over that it was actually happening. So we're having our 17th gathering for our children and returning adoptees here in Minneapolis. There's still time to book a flight, get in the car, plan, buy some travel food, road food, make a road trip. That's a whole presentation in itself on how that came to be and how we've included or worked with counties and different things to make this happen. But it's a really awesome event. So here's one of our initiatives that we do. That's my cousin, Lemoyne Lapointe, working with me. He's a great experiential educator. And we use all kinds of things that are metaphors to talk about the circle. And I tell adoptees, when you were taken, that space that you had in your family and in your community can never be filled by anyone but you. So even though you have this fear of coming home, this fear of entering the community, this immense fear of thinking you're not worthy, you're not, I mean, the things that go through our relatives' minds about how unworthy they feel breaks my heart, but I tell them that. And so at our events, we do things that give a metaphor for that circle, that it's just there and no one can fill it but you. So walk in and take that, your space, your spot that you were given. And I've mentioned this, that the healing really comes from being in that circle. The guy there, the older man next to the jingle dress dancer, he was 62 years old at this event. First time he was ever around Indian people, because he did not know he was adopted until his parents died. And yet he had all these feelings of, you know, he goes, I know, because I look white, right? I shouldn't be thinking I should be someplace else. I mean, it was just amazing, all the things that he went through. But there he was at 62, home. So child removal has had an intergenerational impact. And our services need to be for a lifetime of someone who's placed and needs to be more scrutiny. But also to remember, there's no timeline for healing. You don't graduate. You get better over time. The most important thing for us to know is who we are, where we come from, so you know what you're going to do and where you're going to go. And these can only be found within our culture. Ceremonies are vital because they restore the innocence in our heart. They really, really do. I got so many stories of how we saw that, but replace that pride and that dignity, and ultimately gives us that sense of belonging. So if you wanted to educate yourself about adoption, The Baby Thief is a great book that talks about how this adoption really began and how the narrative got ingrained then, and still remnants of it here today. My story, of course. And then American Baby's a great book that tells the story of a family, a young couple whose baby was taken from them, and how their whole entire life they tried to find him. But in it, she describes all this history that happened in and around adoption. All right. How badly did I go over?
Timing is great. We still have time for more discussion or questions.
Oh, wow, cool. Because I was just really trying to make sure I got that.
We could use all the time that you want to share with us. This has been wonderful.
Are there any questions?
I was getting a question in the chat. Is your PowerPoint shareable? There were some great resources that we tried to capture and also put in the chat.
No, tell the resources you want and we'll get them to you.
Okay, thanks.
The reason I don't do that is somebody used my PowerPoint in front of me. They forgot. Instead, it was theirs. So no, I'm not giving it out. ever again.
Understandable. Well,
Yeah.
Maria Smith has a question. I think we'll have to unmute. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Hi. Thank you, by the way. In the beginning, you mentioned something about how we've gone the other direction. We've gone too far the other direction regarding removal of kids. Did I misunderstand that? And what did you mean by that?
Yeah, in that, at least for Native kids, it's supposed to be imminent harm or danger. And removing children for neglect is not imminent harm or danger. That, you know, that's certainly a need, certainly something that has to happen, but we're removing children for that. We are not focusing on what it really is, imminent harm. But what we're doing is like, well, this is risky. there's a difference between a risk and a threat, right? And so mom gets high in the living room and baby's in the thing. So getting high is not the worst thing in the world that someone could do, right? Smoking a joint. But we've demonized marijuana to be like, oh my God, it's the gateway drug, which we all know now it is not. But what about talking to mom and saying, you know, mom, you know about secondhand smoke, right? You know, she'll go, oh, yeah. Well, even though you think that it may not harm baby shouldn't have that because she's just a baby. Can you agree to show us that you won't smoke around baby? We'll come back, we'll talk about what you need to do to make that happen. But you just having conversations like that, you know, just look at me like, well, no. Let's remember that most individuals they're either in a really high crisis and really don't know, or in a lower place like how smoking or can't get up in time, talking it through to find out what can be done there. So that's what I mean, just gone to the other side. You screwed up, baby's gone. Or even when they observe the parent and the child interacting, so much of the personal judgment of the individual goes into that, as opposed to are they posing at risk, a health threat to their child. And I know some of this comes from social workers being afraid that if something happens to the child and they've left the child in the home, they're responsible. So we can't, that's one of the hurdles that has to be resolved. But that's what I mean by that. Too much heaviness of just knee-jerking, removing the child and not talking it through with mom and dad to find a way to resolve the issue in a way that keeps baby with mom.
Thank you, Sandy. There is a question from Sheldon Spotted Elk in the Q&A. What do you see as the next steps for truth and reconciliation?
Man, I would like to see individual states taking it on, counties taking, saying let's have one. And we just need to continue to do that. However, one of the things I did notice is that I only know how to do them with a spiritual foundation in the day. I don't know how to do it without that, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen. And that where everyone would agree, because during that time there's nothing that happens that is out of pocket. It's just our non-native relatives just wouldn't know, and we just have to educate them along the way. This is why we're doing this is why we're doing that. But we need that to contain the energy and that healing energy, and for our relatives who are sharing their heart and their experience. And I wish people would take my contact information and say, we would like to do one in our county. Because while there's so many things that are similar, there's always differences, right? And we don't know what counties have done to already begin the process. But I can assure you, I just did talking circles for the American Bar Association, and wow, everyone needs to know what is really happening and how they can address and repair. And hi, Sheldon. Good question.
Great, thanks. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and some of the questions and love in the chat have been echoed and or answered. But one of the questions from, I think it was Stanley Nix. What is the Indian definition of family? If it is more inclusive or tribal, the idea of kinship care or placement can be implemented.
Well, yeah. So we don't have the same nuclear understanding of family. And plus, it's like one of the first things I learned going home, so my mom was the oldest of 20, as I mentioned. So I remember my Aunt Cecilia, who's younger than me, said, you have lots of grandpas and grandmas. And I'm like, what? And because all my aunts and uncles are grandmas and grandpas, and cousins are not. Our cousins are looked at more like brothers and sister relationship, and we address them in that way. So first off, our just definition is different, and anyone that the family decides is part of the family is part of the family. That's why we have all kind of kids from when my kids went to college as part of our extended family. And what that means, though, is we take that very seriously. So if an extended family member needs help, then we will help them. Just, and we don't have limitations. But the one thing that we do have is a ceremonial way to make a relative as well. And for the Lakotas, it's called a hunka ceremony. And that is when that takes place, that individual assumes a role in the family alongside all the other siblings or what other relatives, and contributes as a family member and is family. And that's, and also just to remind everyone how tight and how we took care of each other. I remember Chris telling me, he goes, there was never a word for orphan. We didn't have orphan. The word, the understanding of the concept that the child had nothing didn't happen until we had massacres. Then we had children and individuals who had no family because the massacres would happen. So we made a word, orphan. Wablenincha is the word in Lakota. It means to be broken apart into nothing, feeling like you have nothing. And so the family for us then, like whenever we'd have to buy anything like a table, or when we bought our house, I remember saying, well, how many people do you have in your home? How many bedrooms? And I said, well, we have people. It's like, and it's like, how do I explain to somebody, 25 minimally, they come regularly? That's not counting. So I'm glad you asked that, because we do see, and then our community, our young people especially, they define who they see as a grandpa or grandma in the community, or an auntie or uncle. George, my husband, has been grandpa to people all over. He's been, I think he's even started calling Sheldon nephew. And when they call you that back, or when they initiate that, that's a really an honor that they see you in a role that you would be able to mentor or help or encourage. And so we make relatives that way as well. So I've got lots of young women who call me auntie, and I mean, I get introduced at conferences as Auntie Sandy a lot of times too. So it's a beautiful and part of our resilience that keeps us strong and keeps us together.
Uncle George, can I borrow some of that famous action?
Yes. Yeah, hey, Uncle, I'm hungry. Hey.
Well, like I said, when we started and kicked us off in the beginning, when I first met you, Sandy, at NICWA, I felt a connection to you like an auntie, and I think about the teachings that you share and the love, so much for us to learn from our short time with you today, being able to slow down, to have the time to really honor through song, the beauty and the strength, the healing, reconciliation, and for the reminders of why active efforts are so critical It's
Mhm.
about life and death for our people, about stopping that genocide. And we're so thankful for the time that you've taken to share your story and to be with us today. I wish we had more time. I know that we need to transition into our next set of speakers in this next minute. And so just a huge thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Can I borrow that famous actor money? Oh, I just saw where the chats are. Ah, I'm going to tell him you said that, Sheldon. That'll make him feel good. Our relatives that we meet along the way, encourage everybody. And so I got to brag up our nephew, Sheldon, then I'll let you go. Way back, and then our relatives have to get embarrassed when we do it, but that's too bad. That's part of being auntie and uncle, and that's part of being nephew and niece. George was working in